I'm going to be critiquing this video, and just let me give like all the normal caveats. Critiques here, they're not meant to be mean. They don't mean that I think I could do better. I think I would do considerably worse, if anything. So this is meant to be constructive feedback to try to figure out how we as vegans can strategize better when we have these media performances, and specifically when we have, you know, one with Piers Morgan, if you're so lucky or unlucky, depending on how you look at that. But the first thing to point out here is that you have to understand that if you're talking to a stranger in the street, that's going to be a different type of strategy compared to if you're talking to friends and family, compared to if you have like a long form podcast that you're talking on, compared to if you're on just a normal media a media appearance that isn't Piers Morgan. And then even more specifically, if you have a media performance that is Piers Morgan, right? All these are going to demand slightly different strategies, tactics, whatever. And so in reviewing this, when I'm looking at it, I'm going to be saying like, oh, Joey did this well, Joey did that well. That doesn't mean that those things are things that you necessarily want to do when you're talking to strangers or your family, right? This is like this most specific of specific situations, which is like media appearance where you have limited time, host is against you, host is incredibly disingenuous, and I would even say like unethical, just frankly, in the way that he presents things. And so it's a very different vibe. It's a very different like strategy I think you want to take. And this isn't necessarily generalizable, but I still think it's interesting to sort of pick apart and to talk about. So that's just kind of like my preamble there. All right. So yes, Natalie, you should not spend all your time on vegan YouTube. There was something I felt a bit of a detox, I guess. But it is good to be back. All right, so let's actually just start playing this, and I'll kind of comment as I go.
Doing all pleasure in life is one of the 21st century's most bizarre trends, from where I look at it. But there are green, plant-based shoots of recovery. The new fashion is for high-profile vegans, including explorer Bear Grylls, to revealing they're detransitioning back to healthy, meaty diets. So
okay, so like I'm going to stop like somewhat frequently in the beginning here, because I just want to like. I do want us to all pause on sort of the gravity of how tendentious and unethical Piers' style is here. And I know it's all like, yeah, it's Piers Morgan, whatever, blah, 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 you know, and there's lots of shows that do this. But I feel like we have normalized this to a degree that is concerning. This is part of the reason like we can't have nice things, because everything is so rage baity and clickbaity. And while these people do get criticized, I don't feel like they get criticized enough. And I don't think that journalists who do this well and do this ethically get praised enough. So like, this is just, you know, like what he's done here already. He's saying, okay, I think this is bizarre. He says detransitioning back to meaty, healthy diets. And so like what that's obviously meant to do there is make his audience infer that meaty diets, right? I assume diets high in meat are healthy. And then also to infer that vegan diets are unhealthy, right? And he said something else in there that I can't quite remember. But it's like within the first like 17 seconds, his entire preamble is slanted against vegans, right? And so again, like it's like, oh yeah, of course it's slanted against vegans. But that shouldn't be, oh, of course. Like if you're actually a journalist and you're doing journalism, even if you're doing a debate, right? Like framing this in that way is a problem. Even if you disagree with them, even if it's like something that you really disagree with, you know, and you can push back as the host and whatever, but just framing it right from the beginning in that biased of a way, it just is an issue, you know, and it's really shitty. It really is.
celebrity chefs like John Mountain, who runs Fire Restaurant in Perth, Australia, is also leading the fight back. He's made global headlines this week after announcing, sadly, all vegans are banned from Fire for mental health reasons. We thank you for your understanding. Many didn't understand. He's been flooded with fake bookings and hostile reviews. But I'm joined now by the vegan banner himself, John Mountain, and here in the studio, animal rights activist Joey Carbstrong. Well, welcome to both of you. OK, John Mountain, why did you ban vegans from your restaurant?
Morning, Piers. I banned them from my restaurant because, look, I've been a chef for nearly 30 years, but on this particular incident, it was just too much. You know, they grouped together, which, you know, I'm very proud of the vegans for all sticking together, but they did. They grouped and banded together and then started hammering my business with one-star reviews. I saw my rating drop from a sensible 4.2 down to 2.8. They nearly broke me God bless the vegans, though. It didn't
And
work.
what was the incident that provoked all this?
The problem that happened was a girl had emailed me 3 weeks before requesting a vegan selection. And I said, well, look, rather than saying that, what is it that you like? Tell me what you like. And she said, well, you know, I like gnocchi and risotto. I thought, okay, no problem. We change our menu every day, Piers, so it's not an issue. The problem was on the day that she did turn up, I couldn't do it. I let her down, and it was a justifiable complaint.
And she...
Okay, so just right here, and again, other people have commented on this. He says it was a justifiable complaint, and yet he banned all vegans from his restaurant. So again, this just obviously just doesn't make sense on the face of it, but as we go through this too, it strikes me as odd because this guy isn't on message. Like, he hasn't come to this show with a consistent message, which is very odd to me. Because to me, this strikes me as something that's like very calculated. Like, it's hard for me to believe that a guy at this level, like at this level of success, who runs his own successful business, is really just up in his fifis about vegans. Like that is genuinely hard for me to believe that that's more likely than that this is like a calculated effort to get on TV and blah, blah, blah. But the thing is, if it is a calculated effort to get on TV, it's like his message is very muddled. Like he just doesn't have like a consistent narrative here. And it's you're going to see it like more as we go. But that's sort of the first thing, is that like, he's like, yeah, well, she actually was justified in this. It's like, okay, so this seems dead on arrival.
She went nuts.
But yeah, slightly nuts.
And even the fact that him and Piers aren't aligned. So Piers goes, she went nuts. And he goes, well, I mean, yeah, no. Like, so no, clearly she didn't go nuts. He doesn't think she went nuts. Piers doesn't think she went nuts. Piers is obviously rage baiting, of course. And this guy is just like, man, I hate to say this, but this guy does sort of like give me this visceral sense of disgust. And it's not just like his non-vegan views, which I think are reprehensible, but he just comes across as such like a weak pushover in this entire thing. He just seems like he just basically, I mean, cucks to Piers here whenever he's like, well, yeah, okay, right? It's like, he clearly doesn't believe that. If you don't think she went nuts, just say, well, no, she didn't go nuts, but XYZ, right? But he can't do that. It's like, this is what I'm saying. It's like, he's not committed to whatever it is his message was supposed to be. He's not aligned with Piers. It's just like, his whole thing is very like messy. Like it's very hard for me to understand where this guy is coming from. And like, as I watch it more, I watched this several times now. It's like, I really do think he was just up in his feelings about vegans, which again, to me is just absolutely nuts.
I mean, vegans, my thing about vegans is they tend to be, I don't know, they seem to me permanently hangry. Like, the lack of meat in their diet makes them very intolerant of people, and they get very agitated. And if you don't sign up to all things vegan in the way that they want you to, all hell breaks loose.
I think that seems to be the issue, Piers, to be honest. I think they're just missing a really good burger or a glass of milk, you know, or both. You know, they need to sleep more, be a bit more healthy. Although, you know, the vegan diet allegedly is healthy, just not for everybody else, you know. I think each to their own, Piers.
Okay. I'm not going to say too much more about this guy, but again, this is just weird. He's like, yeah, vegans are unhealthy, obviously, because they don't eat meat or drink milk. But then he's like, but also sleep, but also they can be healthy. It's just like, he's all over the place. He can't like commit to whatever it is his message is. And I think the sad thing about this is that you look at the comments of this video and they're still mostly like anti-vegan against Joey. And it just is like, it's so frustrating that they can give such a poor performance. This guy can be all over the map with what he's saying, and people are still essentially like on their side. Now, they aren't in some of the videos, so it depends on which video you look at here. But in this biggest one, like the longest 11-minute interview, they do tend to be more like anti-Joey. And it's just like, ooh, just frustrating. Anyway, this guy really grosses me out. I think he's pathetic.
Okay, well, let's come to Joey. So Joey, Bear Grylls, who I know well, said he's embarrassed he used to promote veganism. He now eats a diet of red meat, blood, bone marrow, as well as salted butter, eggs, fruit and honey. He says he's never felt better. Talking about his transition to a vegan diet, he said, I was vegan quite a few years ago. In fact, I wrote a vegan cookbook. I now feel a bit embarrassed about that because I promoted it. I thought that was good for the environment. I thought it was good for my health. And through time and experience and knowledge and study, I realised I was wrong on both.
he's embarrassed that he promoted a plant-based diet when he drinks urine and bile out of camel's stomach.
Urine's quite healthy, though.
It's healthy. Would you drink urine? Would you rather drink urine?
Absolutely, if I had to, yeah, if I was in a jungle.
Yeah, but if
Again, just more just total clownery here. Like, okay, so there's two things. So either Piers is actually biting the bullet on drinking urine being healthy, or he's trolling. Again, in either case, this means that we shouldn't be taking him seriously. This should be seen as him taking an L. But like, again, unfortunately, just like, I guess his followers just aren't seeing that L. And so I think it is also good to just point out every time Piers is taking L's in this debate. And there's a lot of them, but they go by very fast because he's very good at switching the topics seamlessly.
he's embarrassed that he promoted a vegan diet, and he's not embarrassed of his behaviour on TV, and he thinks that eating the bodies of animals...
Why are vegans so angry?
What?
Okay, so this whole like, why are vegans so angry? Why are they so hangry? Is, again, it's sort of a genius move on Piers' part, because what he's doing is, he's like framing the whole discussion around this really simple talking point. And so that's good because it gives people who are watching like something to latch onto. Okay, vegans are hangry. That's what I'm watching. I'm watching a video about vegans being hangry. And so then they're going to look for confirmation that vegans are hangry throughout this whole thing. So anytime Joey is like forceful or raises his voice, they're going to be like, aha, there we go. Vegans being hangry again. And even this question, like, why are vegans so hangry? Again, another sort of disingenuous, unethical thing to do here is that this is a loaded question. So if he just asked, why are vegans so angry? It's implied that vegans are angry, and now he's just asking why, right? So this is a premise that would be disputed, is that vegans are angry, but then he just blows by that, right? And it's like, well, why are they angry? That's just like a given that vegans are angry. But even this case that why are vegans so hangry, right? This is interesting because it's almost like sort of a double loaded question, right? Because he's asking why they're angry, but the word hangry already implies the why. The why is because they're not eating enough, right? So this question is like, it's so weirdly manipulative on like so many little levels that there is a sort of like, I feel like evil genius in it. But yeah, so it's not just that it's implying that vegans are angry and that's just a given, but it's also implying why they're angry, but asking why in the same question, as if the question itself doesn't imply the why. I know that sounds like kind of complicated and weird, but it is like think about it for a second, like how much he actually loads into this like little talking point of his.
Well, he made a statement saying the vegans are hangry and angry, but he carried on and banned all vegans from his restaurant because of one simple complaint.
He's allowed to.
Yeah,
okay, and this is actually a great response from Joey. If you're in a longer debate, I think you can actually just kind of pull like a meta conversation out of this and be like, well, that's like a loaded question. You're assuming vegans are angry, and I don't agree with that. So let's talk about that first, right? Now, maybe you think vegans are angry. Maybe you think they're justified in being angry. And you can talk about that too. But in this format, you don't have time to do that, right? So what Joey does is just kind of, he just ignores the question and goes off onto like his own point here. So let's just I'm just gonna watch that again real quick because I think it's pretty good.
His behaviour on TV, and he thinks that eating the bodies of animals...
Why are vegans so angry?
Well, he made a statement saying the vegans are hangry and angry, but he carried on and banned all vegans from his restaurant because of one simple complaint.
He's allowed to.
Yeah.
Okay, so then Joey's point here is like, okay, well, he's also angry, right? So being angry, just isn't just a vegan thing, but also this guy himself is angry. So it's kind of funny that he's criticizing other people for that. And this is where Piers does a smart thing. He goes, well, he's allowed to. Okay, but we're not talking about whether someone's allowed to, right? We're kind of talking about why they're angry, or is that anger justified, right? That's sort of the subject. And Piers does this very subtle like slip here, and he does this a lot. It's like a sort of like rhetorical sleight of hand. And so the issue is not, of course, is he allowed to, right? No one's debating that. Although I actually don't know if he is allowed to. I think in the UK, vegans are a protected class. I don't know about Australia. In the US, they aren't, as far as I know. But if they're a protected class, I don't think you actually can do something like that. So that's just kind of whatever the laws are in Australia. But it's just like, if we were just concerned about with like what's allowed, then vegans are also allowed to be angry or hangry or whatever. So then conversation over, right? If all we're talking about is if people are allowed to be this, then there's nothing to talk about because vegans are also allowed, right? So again, this is a subtle switch that Piers is going to do. And Joey responds to this and he's going to switch again. So just like watch this like seamless goalpost shift.
He's allowed to ban a whole group of people from.
Well, he's a chef
from one.
who's just sick of tailoring to vegan people
let me
who want to have all.
So Joey asked him, so is he allowed to do that? Piers doesn't answer. So L and then L again when he doesn't answer. Anytime in a debate like this that you're essentially just like not answering the question, like I think we need to start flagging that as like that person clearly lost that point. And so, right, just taking like loss after loss here. And now he says, what did he say here? It's not that he's allowed to, it's that he's just like tired of it. You know, he's like tired of doing that. It's like, okay, well then what is the argument here, right? Piers is just making no arguments whatsoever, obviously. But Joey's doing a good job, right? Because he's kind of either A, just asking Piers to sort of clarify, like, well, is that a thing? Or he's sort of showing the hypocrisy of doing this, right? He's showing the chef's hypocrisy, which I think are good strategies for this sort of format.
All this stuff and get angry about me.
Well, listen. Wait a second. He got a 2-star review when he was on Great British Menu, right? He'd ripped off his mic, smashed up the studio, and said that he wanted to kill the guy for giving him a 2-star review of a fish dish that he made. He didn't ban all fish eaters from his restaurant.
Well, hang on, you were.
He didn't ban all fish eaters.
Joey. We're going to get personal. You were a gang member, so don't take the high moral ground about smashing something up.
Mate.
So again, here again, Joe, he very intentionally misses Joey's point, redirects, and then tries to do something to throw Joey off and sort of like make him angry, right? So clearly the point that Joey's making is that, you know, other people have given him bad reviews and he hasn't banned those groups of people, but he did ban vegans, right? So what Joey's saying is that this guy is behaving sort of tendentiously or in some sort of unfair way to vegans. This is obviously the point he's making. Piers says, you know, oh, well, you were in a gang, so don't take the moral high ground. So again, Piers just slips this in so effortlessly because now you're watching this and you're like, oh yeah, Joey was trying to take the moral high ground and he shouldn't, you know, he doesn't have any reason to take the moral high ground, right? But that was never on the table, right? This is just something that Piers implied, obviously, that clearly wasn't even happening. And so like, I think this is like the last time it happened so seamlessly, but yeah, right in the beginning there. So first 4 minutes, he does this about 4 times. So just doesn't respond to the point, pretends like he's misunderstanding the point, and then frames the conversation as if like, this is what Joey was saying. And so as a viewer just watching this in a sort of broad global sense, you can get the impression that Joey is being hypocritical here, right? Even though that wasn't the point he was making. And so it's really hard to respond to this, I think, in real time, because this is just what Piers is good at, right? He's good at this sort of unethical, sort of like, I don't know if you call it bullying or what exactly, but it's impressive in its own sort of like evil right. But I think that Joey does a pretty good job here. I think that he's generally responding. He's generally pointing out hypocrisy, you know, for people who are listening. You know, I mean, maybe what you could do here is go meta in the conversation and be like, Piers, you know, that wasn't my point. I was saying X, Y, Z. But it's such a shit show that I don't know if that's where you want to go exactly. And what Joey is about to do is what I think is actually the main thing you need to do when you come on these things, which we'll see in a second. And this does actually throw Joey off a little bit, but he does recover pretty quickly. So I think in this instance, you don't even take the bait, like, because he responds a little about his gang membership or whatever. But I think instead of taking the time to say that, I think he should have just been like, Piers, my point was that he's being hypocritical because he's treating vegans and non-vegans differently. My point wasn't that he has like moral high ground or whatever.
I'm completely honest about it. There's been documentaries made about
it. So don't take the high moral ground about him losing his temper. You were literally in a gang.
I was 10 years ago, 10 years sober now. You're going to use that.
I'm just saying, if you're going to get personal with him.
But anyways, I don't walk around with dead baby pigs facing them like that. Like, does that look like someone who really gives a damn about animals?
Picture.
Like, you know, and that's his profile picture. Looking at a dead pig.
Joey,
in Australia, one second, I just want to say
Joey,
this. In Australia, pigs are killed in gas chambers, okay? They cause pigs, they're horrible. Have you seen footage from inside a gas chamber?
Joey, here's the thing.
I recently exposed one in the UK. Yeah. They scream to death and beg for mercy. Okay. In Perth, there's a gas chamber called Lindley Valley Pork, right? And this guy serves pork at his restaurant. All right. And why would you be more upset of a little complaint as a chef than pigs being murdered in gas chambers?
Okay, let me ask you the question.
Okay, so I think that's actually either the strongest or the second strongest point in this debate. This is where I think Joey is doing super well. So I said this in my breakdown of the Nathan McGovern debate, that one of the best things you can do is have some sort of visual messaging, okay? So, and one of the reasons for that is confirmation bias, right, is one of the most pernicious, pervasive biases we have, right? That basically means that you tend to believe what you already believe or what you want to believe. The second part is really actually, they've parsed it into like desirability bias in some studies, but generally confirmation bias encompasses that as well, like believing what you want to believe. And there's sort of three components to that. And so most people just know confirmation bias in general, but they aren't aware that it kind of breaks down into multiple components. And those components are kind of how you seek out information, how you interpret information, and then how you remember information. And so in combating confirmation bias, I think us as vegans on these sort of shows, we want to think, okay, how do we combat each of those sort of components individually? As far as seeking out, getting on the show on a massive platform that has a largely non-vegan audience, this has 3.41 million subscribers, right? Well, you already did that part. You got the seeking out, because people are going to be watching this, and even if they're not seeking out, they're just going to hear the vegan message. So that's covered. The interpretation is going to be, kind of the argumentation, like who has the better argument, who has the better data. That's going to be a little bit more difficult to do, especially with Piers, who's going to interrupt you, who's going to like frame things disingenuously, who has control over the entire studio. They're 2v1ing you, blah, 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 right? I think you want to think about the interpretation for sure, but I don't think it's actually your main strategy. I think your main strategy is working on the memory component. And so like, what do I mean by memory here? Well, so if you want to believe something, you tend to like seek out articles that say that. And then when you read an article, you tend to interpret it in a more favorable way for the thing that you already want to believe, like for your tribe or your side or whatever. But something people don't know is that you also tend to remember stuff better that jives with like what you want to believe or what you already believe, right? So like if let's say I'm like pro-choice, right? And I read a pro-choice article and then I read a pro-life article. Not only am I going to interpret them differently, but I'm actually going to remember the pro-choice article better than the pro-life article, right? So if we figure that most people watching this aren't vegans, then they're probably not even going to remember the points that contradict their narrative very well to begin with, right? So what we want to do is we want to figure out ways to make this memorable. One of the easiest ways to make things memorable is using some sort of visual messaging, okay? Like, when people are like, oh yeah, I'm actually a visual learner. It's like, yeah, everyone's a visual learner, virtually everyone, right? If you add visual aids to any sort of like pedagogical teaching thing or whatever, people are going to learn better, they're going to remember better, etc. And so because he obviously can't control like the graphics that are coming up in studio, right? Like he can't play a video or whatever. Well, he actually does in this. You have to bring a picture. And so this is kind of what I suggested with Nathan McGovern, is that you bring some sort of picture or write something on your arm and like show it to the audience. And there I thought that the problem is that the producers of the show wouldn't actually show it, but they actually do show it, which is really awesome. So any sort of visual messaging I think is really good, but on top of that, he picks really good visual messages. So this whole thing is kind of about like, presumably like, was this chef justified? And so part of it is, was he justified? But part of it is also just like, is the chef a cool guy? Is he a good guy? Or is the vegan the bad guy, right? Who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? And so Joey comes in and is like, here's a picture of him with a dead pig. And not just with a dead pig, but that he's sort of like desecrating the pig, right? Like he's interacting with the pig in a way that is like obviously disrespectful. And almost no one is cool with that. Even if you talk to like hunters and anti-vegans, the thing you hear a lot is like, well, we respect the animal, we use all the parts of the animal, blah, blah, blah. And even if we think that's BS, right, it still is sort of reflective of the general attitude that to like desecrate or, sort of debase the corpse of an animal is some like extra layer of bad. And so this, I think, is it's good that it's a visual message to begin with. But in addition to that, it's something that is going to really communicate that this guy's a dick to a non-vegan audience, right? And like that picture, like even when I first watched this debate and I was thinking back over the debate, I could only remember like 3 things from the debate. And one of them was Joey holding up that picture of him holding the dead baby, right? And so I think this is like very, very strong move.
Question that I asked a vegan activist the other day, which is that given that 80% or 90% of the world's almonds come from California, where there are made involving the demolition of billions of bees who get murdered. How do you feel about the little
They don't
guys?
get murdered. That's completely false, and I don't know why.
How many billions of bees die in the pollination?
I've got the 2022 data right here. They die mostly from parasites and pests. 66% die of varroa mites or other pests and parasites. Some die from disease.
In the making
of
almonds and avocados.
They don't.
Oh, they do. They do.
The data is here. It's this here.
Do you know where I read
this? This here is data from US Department of Agriculture.
Do you know where I read this? I read it in The Guardian, the vegan Bible. Even The Guardian admitted that you vegans who eat avocados and almonds...
6.7%. This is not...
You don't care about the little guys.
We boycott...
Billions of bees get murdered and you don't care.
Where do those bees come from?
Huh?
Where do those bees come
from? In America, they come from all over the country.
The commercial honey industry.
That's true.
And
a lot of them do.
Boycott? What do vegans boycott?
Go on.
The commercial honey industry.
Why don't you boycott almonds and avocados?
Because I don't see a reason to. Most of the bees are dying from mites.
You don't see...
Do you see...
Okay, so again here, another visual aid and also a visual aid that lends you credibility, right? So all Piers can do here is, you know, say, oh, I read a Guardian article or Google it or whatever, which is like something everyone says, right? I'll just Google it. But Joey not only brings a visual aid that has a graph on it, so it's like, ooh, that looks sciencey, right? He also is saying like, this is the USDA data, right? And so clearly, I think, you know, most people, even, you know, most normies, even people who aren't versed in science, are going to say, okay, USDA data on bees sounds more credible than just Google it, and it sounds more credible than a Guardian article, right? So here again, and again, like I said, this has all the advantages of visual messaging again. So here again, I think he bests Piers on this because it's just better in every way. Piers is not showing any sort of data, so he doesn't even show a picture of any sort, where Joey does, of course, and then Joey's source is also more credible. We'll also see in a minute here that, well, I'll just wait for this to go here.
That's the reason to. Okay. All right.
Listen,
so you don't care about the little
only
guys.
6% die from pesticides, so it's not really a rights violation. They're not murdering the bees.
Joey, here's my point.
The bees
big pig. A big pig makes you cry. A little bee.
Killed in gas chambers.
You don't care.
No, listen.
You don't care about it.
There's no reason to be upset about pollination.
Sometimes 50
they die from mites. Why aren't you angry at the mites?
Hang on, Joey.
Varroa mites.
Sort of shout over each other. Sometimes 50 billion bees die in 6
from
weeks.
mites.
To give you vegans.
I've literally just
your
told you they
almonds
die
and
from mites.
avocados.
Check out the,
that's not true.
Agricultural stats
that is
from
not
America.
true. Read the Guardian.
I read it in an article. An anecdote, so it must be true. Listen.
Joey, how long have you been a vegan?
10 years.
Right, do you actually...
So I think... so obviously, like, Piers realizes that Joey's brought receipts, he's got better sources, so he's got to change the subject, right? Also here, Piers is probably changing the subject because Piers is here to make an entertaining show, to make money, etc. And so he's just going to change the subject every so often because you know, he just has to keep it rolling. So that's definitely part of it. But again, here, like once Piers is pushed into a corner, he just switches the subject. This is obviously classic Piers. But I think during that, there is, I think, one critique I would issue of Joey here, and he does it a little bit later as well. And there is this sort of like condescending laughing. And now, does Piers deserve that condescending laughing? I mean, yes, probably, right? I mean, given all the things he's done and like what strikes me as obviously disingenuousness. But this, I think, is going to play pretty badly to an audience. Now, of course, people are going to say, oh, Joey seems angry, blah, blah, blah. I think that, you know, that can play bad. But I think the condescension, this is kind of the real thing that non-vegans fear and like makes them sort of recede, I think. And so I think that condescending laughter probably hurts him more than helps him here. So I think definitely in the thing with Piers, I think you can definitely be forceful. I think you can definitely feel free to interrupt him because he's going to interrupt the hell out of you. But I don't know if you want to go the route of condescending laughter. I think that plays totally fine, again, to a vegan audience like us. But remember, we're not trying to convince vegans of this. We're trying to convince non-vegans. And specifically, there's some sliver of people who aren't super pro Piers, right? And who aren't obviously vegan, who kind of fall a little bit in the middle. Like maybe they watch Piers sometimes, maybe they don't. Maybe they think he's a jerk. They just like to see him like, you know, get in silly arguments with people. But that condescending laugh, I think is gonna generally read poorly. And again, I just want to point out here, I'm not saying I could do any better. Obviously, this is really difficult. I'm not judging Joey as a person or saying, wow, what a terrible debater. I actually think Joey did really fantastic in this whole thing. But I'm just trying to offer some critiques of things. I think if we want to tweak here and kind of figure out those variables, I think that's one that could look better, And I think this is the thing is like Earthling Ed very, very rarely condescendingly laughs at people. And I think that's he doesn't take this frame of judgment and condescension. I think that's a big reason for his success. Now, Joey has a different style, and I don't even think necessarily that Earthling Ed would do better on Piers Morgan. I think the one big problem with Earthling Ed on Piers Morgan is that I don't even know if he'd get invited because I don't know if Piers thinks he would be entertaining enough, right? So I think part of the reason that Piers invites Joey on is because he knows Joey's going to be entertaining. So for whatever he thinks about veganism, that's going to be a secondary concern to, is my show like fun and crazy and wild and getting the clicks, right? And so he knows Joey is going to bring those clicks or keep those eyeballs watching. So yeah, but I do think be entertaining. You can be a little angry, you can interrupt and all that, but I would try to mitigate that sort of like that condescending, like, you idiot, that laughter, even if the person deserves it.
Because you seem quite agitated to me. Like you want a bit of...
You spout nonsense about bees being murdered when they die from mites.
They are murdered. They're murdered.
So, yeah,
it's clown behaviour.
But do you think, in a way, you represent what I feel about vegans? That you're all quite hangry.
Are you against animal cruelty, Piers?
Yes.
Then why do you support animal cruelty when you support the meat
I don't.
industry?
I've defended the bees for years.
No, well, they're not murdered. They die from mites.
Billions of bees are murdered so that you vegans can eat almonds and avocados.
Do you boycott honey where they're hired from?
John, let me bring in John here. John, look,
Okay,
here's my point of...
I guess we should talk about the actual bees point real quick. So I don't know what the best way to go here is. Joey does it. I don't know if he already said it yet or he'll do it later, but he talks about, he said, well, do you support honey? And then Piers immediately changes the subject, right? Just pointing out Piers' hypocrisy. So I think one way is just to point out Piers' hypocrisy right back to him. The problem is, I think for people watching, if people think that he's being truthful and that he really cares about the bees, then maybe that hypocrisy point is going to land. But I think what happens is like people are sort of interpreting Piers in this like sort of rhetorical purgatory, I guess, where like, man, maybe he's serious, maybe he's not. So if Joey points out a hypocrisy, they can be like, yeah, but Piers was just trolling. He doesn't care about the bees, duh. And so like, I don't know how well the hypocrisy point lands, but it might land, I don't know, maybe for the audience. I think what we want to actually have is just a better response to this in general, right? And so like, I think one thing to say, and you would want to compress this to somehow get it out in a Piers time frame where he would actually let you talk. But I think you kind of want to say something more in the range of like, look, every sort of farming we do kills billions, trillions, quadrillions of insects, right? I haven't done the math on this myself, but I think the bees killed in any of these productions is probably a rounding error compared to the total number of insects killed in farming. And so like, I think we can kind of just lead with like, look, even when you consider that animals eat things that humans can't, we feed animals like 3 times the amount of human edible calories, which means the amount of insects killed for animals is like significantly higher than the number of insects killed for animal farming is significantly higher than the number of animals killed for plant farming or crop farming or however you want to put it. And so like, if you care about bees, clearly you care about insects, right? I assume you don't just care about bees and not other insects. And so if that's the case, like I said, like I think, and again, we can check the math somewhere on it, but I think the bees come out to essentially be like a rounding error on this. And not only that, but like different crops are going to kill different numbers of insects, right? And so we could go down the line here and be like, well, here's the crop that kills the most insects. Here's the crop that kills the least insects. And then like, would we, would the ask of vegans be like, we should only eat that crop that kills the least, the least amount of insects when you're considering, tilling and pesticides and all this stuff. And like, you only end up eating one crop because every other one is worse than the alternative crop, right? So I think something more in that realm of just like, look, and I think an important part here is to point out that vegans already know this, because something that people get real smug about is like that they're telling vegans for the first time that other animals die in crop production. They're like, vegans, interesting. They're like, wow, Vegans don't even know that in crop production, like tons of animals and insects are killed. It's like this is the most common version of the crop deaths argument I get, like on videos and TikToks and whatever. And it's that like, it's this like smug condescension as if like vegans weren't aware of that. So I think it's an important thing to always put that in there and be like, Piers, all sorts of crop production kills lots of insects. Every vegan knows that, right? We're trying to minimize that harm to insects and do the best we can in the system we have, right? And just point out that obviously far more insects are killed in animal ag. So getting that into some sort of soundbite, and that soundbite, so based on my calculations, I did it for the last video, I did it for this one as well. You probably need that soundbite to fit into about 10 seconds. And I'll tell you about those calculations later. But I think that's more the angle you want to go here with Piers. Because remember, you're not really talking to Piers, right? You're talking to the audience. So you want to show the audience that A, this isn't a gotcha. You've already heard it all before. B, this is about minimizing the harm when you can to insects. And also that like more insects are killed in other things, right? Bees aren't the only insects, because this kind of frames it as if bees are the only insects that die here, right? So I think those points are probably good points to hit.
About the vegans, there's a lot of hypocrisy, as there is with all these debates, right? Which is that if you want to eat almonds and avocados as a vegan, you feel virtuous, you think you're saving the planet as well. Actually, neither of those things are true. Billions of bees get killed to make almonds and avocados. People can go read the proper reports about this.
Yeah.
And also, they fly them then around the world, or they truck them around the world, and of course that is terrible for the planet.
They truck animal products around the world.
Do you believe, John, that there's a kind of basic hypocrisy here with the vegans?
Look,
So that was good also. I'm actually surprised the producers kind of give Joey a lot of leeway here. So while he was saying that you truck crops around the world, you can hear Joey, and he's off camera in the background, say, animals are trucked around the world. I am actually surprised they didn't just like drop his mic for that, at least in like this at least in this edit of it. But because I think that Nathan McGovern was saying they did do that with him, is that they did drop the audio for him. And I think the reason that may be, now maybe this is reading too much into it or whatever, but I think the reason that may be is that Joey put this whole thing up on his channel, so I imagine he had some agreement with Sky News Australia beforehand that like he's going to come on as long as he can also post this. And so if you have that happening on one where the audio cuts out and not on another, then that does look really bad for like the whole Sky News Australia, I guess like media, whatever it is they are, rather than just like Piers Morgan. And so I think he gets a little more leeway because of that, and also probably because he has a big YouTube channel where he can come on and be like, hey, here's the audio that like I have and here's the audio they have. Isn't it interesting how they did this very obviously unethical and like deceptive thing? And so I think they give him a little more leeway, and I'll point that out later because they actually cut to him at one point when they don't need to, while he's showing a chart. And I thought that was also interesting because they could have just totally not cut to him.
I think, Piers, what I've noticed is that there's a strange correlation that they have between eating meat and death and murder, which they like to keep promoting that murderous side. I think if they look at the definition of murder, this is human versus human, and that is it. Look, I'm 100%.
Like, again, I know this isn't original. I know I sound like a broken record from the beginning, but like, again, not aligned with Piers at all here. Like, Piers is just calling bees getting killed murdered constantly in the last part, and then this guy is like, murder only applies to humans, right? And of course there's no discussion between these two. Piers is like, well, I do think that's murder. He's not saying like, oh well, yeah, I think Joey's right, the killing bees isn't murder. Of course, right? They're somehow on a team but completely misaligned, and no one gives a shit. Right? Like, it's just like, man, it's infuriating.
Percent against animal cruelty, and for him to bring up the Great British Menu, well, it just shows his mentality. Good lad, congratulations, well done. It's not what we're about. I think each should be to their own, and you should just enjoy your life. If they're going to argue, Piers,
classic thought terminating cliche, right? To each their own. It's just a personal choice, blah blah blah, right? Obviously, it's not a personal choice because there are other persons, other individuals who are getting harmed here by the billions. But yeah, just classic thought terminating cliche here. Just red meat, as it were, for the non-vegan audience.
Killing animals, enjoy your life.
But Joey, why
Oh
can't
my
you?
God.
Why
Why,
you're killing animals? Look at this.
Joey, it's a
Posing
pig.
with a murdered
It's a
piglet.
pig. It's a
Beautiful.
pig. Yeah.
Posing with a murdered
That's
piglet.
beautiful.
And it
Joey.
wasn't just, you can't handle a simple complaint from and this woman, she's a very nice
But
woman.
Joey-
I spoke to this young woman.
Yeah.
She's very nice, very kind, very polite, and
Yeah.
you can't handle a simple
Joey, let me ask you a
complaint as
question.
Celebrity chef.
Joey.
And it's clear,
Joey.
even meat eaters complain about his
Joey.
restaurant. He doesn't ban all meat.
Joey, if
The
you
guy's
want to
an
be,
idiot.
if you want to be a
You're
vegan,
an
I don't
idiot.
care.
So just notice how he's like not letting Piers talk at all there. Piers is trying to interrupt and he just keeps talking over him. Again, 9 times out of 10, that is not the move. You shouldn't be doing that with your friends and family. You probably shouldn't be doing that in street outreach. But in this instance, it is actually the thing to do because otherwise Piers is just going to steamroll you. You're not going to get time to talk. And I think there's also another added benefit here, which is that, okay, again, we're talking to the non-vegan audience. Non-vegan audience generally going to view vegans negatively. So whatever you do, they can put a negative spin on it, right? If you're a little more, if you're more polite and civil, right, that would be like one way to describe a certain demeanor. But if they don't like you, then they're going to just view you as like weak and a pushover. If you're more like forthright and forceful, and you don't take shit from anyone, you say what you mean, like that would be a positive spin. But a negative spin that someone could put on you is, well, he's just angry and unhinged and overly emotional, right? And so because in either sense, they're going to peg this negative spin on you, right? You have a choice between sort of meek and weak and a pushover, or an asshole but strong, right? Like you're a jerk, you're kind of pushy, but you at least come across as like strong. In a situation like that, where you're in this sort of catch-22, always pick strong over weak, because strong people at least respect or can respect or be like, I get it. Whereas weak people will not respect. So if you're in this sort of like, well, it's not a false dichotomy, this, I just call it like an annoying dichotomy, then I think you do go for that. The only other thing here is that, again, there could be a third choice where you are so grounded and calm and sort of centered that you can actually calm Piers down and sort of get a genuine discussion out of him. That is a possibility. I think with Piers, it is such a remote possibility, though, that it's probably not even worth trying. The one person, of course, who I would like to see try is Earthling Ed, because he really has that effect on people. And so I think if anyone could do it, Ed could do it. If anyone could do it, Ed could. But I still think his probability is super low. And so I think even though that would almost be the best outcome to my mind, is having someone who actually like sort of broke Piers out of his either anti-vegan shell, or what I think is more likely is his just like, I want to make money and by being a troll shell, right? If you can break him out of that, I think that would be a really, really powerful moment. But even though I think it would be more powerful than this interview, I think the chance of it happening is so low that this is probably the way to go. That Joey is probably, I think he's probably the top person you want going toe-to-toe with Piers.
Yeah, right. It's entirely down to you. If you want,
they're not being slaughtered.
billions of bees, everyone go and
Billions
Google.
of bees are getting killed by mites.
Here's what I say
Exposed.
to everyone watching this, either on the show tonight or on YouTube later. Go and Google bees,
US Department of Agriculture stats,
almonds,
right here,
avocados,
Yeah.
and you'll see the truth. The truth.
Sorry,
Even the Guardian.
Okay, that was the place where Joey interrupts and they actually pan to him, which is crazy to me.
Show tonight or on YouTube later. Go and Google bees,
US Department of Agriculture stats,
almonds,
right here,
avocado.
Right there. They did not have to pan to him there. And I don't know why they did. I think that's good. Maybe there's a low-key vegan on the staff somewhere, or maybe they thought that would be like a better, just better for the show in general. But I'm very surprised that they panned to him there.
And you'll see the truth. The truth. Even the Guardian, where they all are compelled to eat lentils every day when they wear their sandals to work.
This is a gas chamber, Piers. This is how pigs are killed and slaughtered in the UK. This is my investigation.
Do you mind if I ask you a question?
Why don't you play me the sound of billions of bees being murdered? Well, I know that animals get killed so I can eat
They're
pigs.
screaming to death.
Right.
Look at them, face them.
What do you think bees do?
Face them, they're
What do you
screaming to
think
death.
bees do when you murder them?
They get killed by mites. This is gas chamber. Look at it.
No.
You don't even want to look at it.
They get
Coward.
slaughtered.
You're a
I'm
coward.
not cowardly.
Look at it.
I know that animals get
They're
slaughtered
murdered. This
so
is
that
the
I can
UK.
eat animal meat.
All right. This might be massive copium, okay? This might be massive copium. But I feel like there's a little part of Piers' expression where it breaks him for a second. again, I might be coping hard on that. I don't know, but I feel like I saw like a tinge there of something where it kind of like broke through to him. But okay, I think this is a really good move. Again, like I said, I think one of the things is you're just talking to a big audience who doesn't know that much about veganism. One of the most evocative things you can possibly do is point out to people that pigs die in gas chambers. And Joey here again, he lends credibility to that claim by showing a video of it. Now, we can't see the video. Obviously, they're not going to zoom in on the video. But the very fact that he's holding a phone while he's saying it and you can hear the noise and he's saying, I filmed it. If he was just like, yeah, pigs are put into gas chambers, that sounds really bad. I think that's good. We should definitely be saying that all the time. But it still can feel a little abstract. Even given all that, it's still a little abstract. So for the audience to see that he literally has a video on his phone of the thing that he's talking about and that he filmed, it makes that abstract slightly more concrete, and that's important. And so I also like that he just like, Piers is talking and Joey's like, I don't give a shit, dude. I'm just interrupting you and putting like pigs and gas chambers in your face. Now, again, plenty of people are like, he just seems angry, whatever. I think that's an L that's worth taking here. Just for the fact that some people are going to go look into, well, pigs and gas chambers, is that really a thing? And in fact, one of the comments on one of these videos actually says that. They're like, I'm not a vegan, but I went and looked at pigs and gas chambers and it is real and it's horrible, right? And it was I think a decently upvoted comment, right? So that's what we're looking for. And tons of people went and looked at that, right? That didn't feel the need to come back and comment. They were just like, oh my God. So I think that's a really big win. Big win there. Even though I can see it coming across as slightly unhinged to people, but it's a good moment. And it's like, again, the whole thing sticks out in your mind. That sound, the fact that he's like throwing a phone in his face. This is like a memorable moment from the interview that's like hard to forget, you know? And like I said, and just if you weren't here earlier, memory is something that gets sort of eroded via confirmation bias, right? So if you want to believe that nothing is going wrong on these farms and things like that, and someone says, well, pigs are put in gas chambers, you're more likely to forget that if you don't believe it and you don't want to believe it. And this just makes it that much harder to forget.
Stuck this camera in this gas chamber in the UK at Pilgrim's Pride, and they scream for their lives, and every single animal welfare
here's my
charity are
problem.
against
Here's
it.
my problem.
And you eat bacon and you promote it.
I love bacon.
You promote it.
I love bacon.
You say you're against
I
animal
love
cruelty.
sausages. I love it all. I love eating meat.
You love animal cruelty.
Yeah, I'm prepared to admit I love eating meat. You're not prepared to
Look at this. Oh my God. The look on this guy's face.
denounce avocado and almonds.
Because you're making up stats. They don't get
because
slaughtered.
they actually lead to the
Pollination doesn't
extermination of
slaughter- they wanna
millions of
keep these
bees.
alive.
Final word to John. John, is there anything that would persuade your mind to let vegans in? Because obviously he'd be a fantastic
Piers.
guest in your restaurant.
It's just discrimination, isn't it?
Thank you, Piers. I do
Discriminating
apologise.
against the whole
I
group of
didn't hear you
people.
then.
It's just absolute childish behaviour, discriminating against the whole group of people because of one little silly complaint. Go ahead.
Joey, what was it?
So again, like, Joey really like is like holding his frame really hard here. Like, and this guy also is like a pushover. So like, if you're like, any vegan should debate this guy because this guy is going to get slaughtered. He's going to get murdered. That guy is like actually talking, and Joey just like pulls up on him, and the guy just shuts up and lets like Joey go on his whole point, which is, I mean, I guess again you could view that as polite, but, and I think in many contexts I would just view that as him being polite, but given everything else I've seen from him, he just seems weak. He just seems like he lets people walk all over him, which is weird.
Joey, when was the last time you laughed?
Last time I laughed, when I heard you say that all bees are slaughtered because of avocados, it's an absolute abject lie.
It's an absolute.
Okay, so this is actually a pretty solid comeback in the moment. Again, Piers is asking like a sort of impossible question. When was the last time you laughed? Like, how are you even going to answer that? If you answer that, it seems weak. If you're like, I laughed last Tuesday, then you're just kind of like folding to his sort of like framing of the situation. And if you're like, I never laugh, people are like, humorless vegans, right? So I don't even know what I do there. I think when someone asks questions like that, I tend to just ignore and then go into a different topic if they're kind of being that way. But Joey actually just like, he's very quick on his feet here and has that zinger, like when you told me that like bees are murdered. So that's, I think, another, like, again, I don't think this makes people be like, oh, he won the debate, but just I think a really good clap back there in the moment.
Facts.
Facts don't care about your feelings, Piers.
Undeniable.
Can I get a word
Facts
in?
don't care about your
Yeah,
feelings.
John, final word to you.
Final word is, how many vegans does it take to change a light bulb?
Go on.
None. They all prefer to stay in the dark.
Well, wait for the punchline. What's the punchline? None what?
Go have a cry, mate,
They
about
all
the
prefer
complaint.
to stay in the dark.
Go have a cry.
Actually,
about
the other one I
complaint.
like is how do you know when someone's vegan? Don't
I'll show
worry.
you gas chamber footage.
Don't worry.
The UK.
They'll soon tell you and play
gas
pictures and stuff of people screaming.
Pigs being murdered in gas
What they
chambers.
won't play you is bees being
Well
murdered.
done,
Joey,
You're
great to
brilliant.
see you.
Bless
John,
you, mate.
thank you for joining me from Perth.
Yeah, so again, like they're at the end, like interrupting people, generally bad, but they're literally ending the segment on jokes about vegans. Like this is just the thing, is like people turn into such children when the topic of veganism comes up. It is unbelievable to me. Like and they're not even telling good jokes. They're telling like the most tired vegan jokes in existence. And that's how they're bookending this interview. So Piers starts off just framing it totally against vegans, and then they're going to end it with jokes about vegans, right? And so again, normally I think interrupting is bad. You want to let people say what they need to say, but clearly these jokes aren't furthering the conversation. They're just meant to demean vegans. And I think Joey interrupting him, he interrupts them in such a way that neither of them can really get off their punchlines. Piers sort of fumbles his punchline, and just like, yeah. I think overall, certainly from an entertainment standpoint, very good. I think a really good performance. And again, I think that his general demeanor matters far less than the fact that he had the image of the chef, the image of the agriculture, right, of the study, and then was talking about gas chambers and showing that he had footage of gas chambers. Those to me did 80% of like the good work of this video. And then his demeanor here, I think, helped, the other percent. And then hurt a little bit in some instances, right? There's always going to be pros and cons. So being sort of more forceful and aggressive, there are going to be cons. I think it was outweighed by the pros, right? People are going to say you're angry, unhinged, whatever. But I think given the sort of the alternatives, this is probably as best as you can do. And yeah, so I overall I thought it was good. I was very happy with it. Then of course there's now more stuff with this guy, with Tash Peterson going in, and yeah, it's bad. So what else do we want to talk about here? Oh, so okay, I went back and I looked. Okay, I looked at the Nathan McGovern interview and I looked at the Orla interview. And something I really said about the Nathan McGovern one was that Nathan didn't answer many of the questions posed to him. He just sort of deflected and answered something else or did his bingo card. And I'm like, that's not gonna play well to audiences. And I showed a video in that of like a fairly large YouTube channel saying just that. And if you look at the comments, you'll see a lot of that as well. Being like, well, he didn't answer any of these questions. He didn't answer any of these questions. In this interview, and they actually say that about Orla as well. So if you didn't see it, that's Orla. This is like the first Piers Morgan interview, I think, on his like new Sky News thing. She veered more towards the sort of like civil, right? And so people were viewing her as weak. They're like, oh, she's going to cry, blah, blah, blah. But they also said that she didn't really answer any questions. Then the next one in this saga was this guy, Nathan McGovern. Nathan went for the more condescending attitude. And again, it didn't play well. And again, I'm not insulting. I think what these people are doing for Animal Rebellion is fantastic. I think they're very brave, getting out there, putting their bodies at risk, engaging in like legal risks and things like that. So this is no hate on them. Again, this is all hopefully meant to be constructive. But he kind of took this more like smug strategy, and just kind of like deflecting. And in some sense, it didn't allow Piers to bully him, but people don't really like that smugness. Like that doesn't play well to an audience. And again, they were all saying how he didn't answer the questions. If you look at this video, the one we just watched, people aren't saying, oh, wow, he didn't answer the question. He just didn't answer the question. No one has that. I'm sure someone has that complaint in there, but that was not a complaint that I saw or saw very frequently in the comments. And I think that's notable because you do actually have to respond to these questions, right? You need to do it in a very tight soundbite, of course, one that you should have pre-written. And I think you should probably even write it a couple different ways and drill those before going on here. Because again, like I said, he's probably only going to give you about somewhere between like 8 to 12 seconds to talk in each segment. So yeah, so that would be one thing. The other thing is, okay, this is a 1 minute. So in this main segment, this is like the 11-minute version, and this is by Sky News Australia. Generally not super positive towards Joey. However, this one that's 1 minute and 41 seconds long, this one is very positive to Joey, and it's where he shows the chef with the pig, and then I think he also shows, This is him showing the chart. So this is an abbreviated, just a chunk of the video. And in this 1 minute and 41 second chunk, he shows 2 of those pictures. This has far more positive comments towards Joey. Okay. I say that because I think that it sort of corroborates my hypothesis here that the best parts of this debate from like the non-vegan perspective that's going to convince the most people are the parts where he's using visual aids, and they're very like relevant and credible visual aids. Okay. So again, could there be other reasons that this, sometimes there's randomness in the comments. Sometimes you just post the comment first, it gets voted to the top. There's all sorts of things that this could be. It doesn't necessarily like prove my hypothesis, but I think it is interesting that these, at least to my eye, I mean, you can go and look at the videos and see if you think that's true, but this one seemed to have the most positive comments. And there's another version of this too. Like, so Sky News Australia uploads like a bunch of different versions. Like they have an 11-minute version, an 8-minute version, a 1-minute version, or a 1 minute 41 second version, and like a 3-minute version that's like different chunks of it. So they clip different parts. And I just thought it was interesting that one seemed to have like a lot of positive comments. The only unfortunate thing is it has like some of the least amount of views on it. So yeah, that kind of sucks, but all right. What else did I want to say? Oh yeah, I did just want to point out that, yeah, so I just did a quick look at the amount of time they had to talk. And so I think for John Mountain, he had 33 seconds, 30 seconds, and then 40 seconds. Whenever he was asked a question generally, and that before Piers would interrupt. But Piers also interrupted him. And so it's just like I think it's good when you have like the friendly guest, like the Piers friendly guest and the non-friendly guest, that you know that your limit, basically your ceiling, even if you're the friendly guest, is probably only about like 30 or 40 seconds. So like if you're the non-friendly guest, you're definitely not getting 30 or 40 seconds, unless you're very forceful, very talking over him, or you can structure your sentences in such a way that it's like awkward for him to like get in there and interrupt or whatever. But yeah, so vegans going on to talk to Piers Morgan, expect about like 8 to 12 seconds, I would say, based on, my very extensive research of like clicking when they start talking and then clicking when Piers interrupts them on several of these videos. But yeah, that's what I would kind of shoot for there. But yeah, did I want to say anything else? Just another thing too here is I think you want to, in normal conversation, if someone's like, this kills a lot of bees, and you say, well, actually, animal ag kills even more bees, and here's why, and here's the source. That seems like a very sort of intuitive and good thing to do from like a pedagogical perspective. But with Piers, as soon as he hears animal agriculture kills more bees, he's going to interrupt that, refute it, like start talking over you, right? So like, I think when you're talking to Piers, you have to sort of like flip the way that you usually do a sentence and put that thesis statement more in the back and just like front load it in a way that's like if he says, for instance, a bunch of bees are killed in crop production, you say, yeah. So if you look at the data from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, what you find is that animals actually eat way more crops than humans do. And so because of that, more bees are killed, right? So you only put that thesis statement at the very end. And so it's harder for him to get there and interrupt, because if you say, yeah, well, according to the USDA, he's probably not going to like interrupt after you say according to the USDA, right? It's a little more awkward. He's waiting for you to like make a point and then jump in and either like undercut you or whatever. And so I think if you kind of structure your sentences in that way, you might be able to get like a little more leeway. You might be able to get a little more words in there before he interrupts you or whatever. But I don't know. Maybe not. It's a tough thing with him. But yeah, overall, I think this was good. I was pretty impressed with this.